Hi, everyone. This is Jeff Diamond, and I am the former president of the Tennessee Titans and former vice president general manager of the Minnesota Vikings. And I am working with Moxy Monitor, and Roger Schmitz is with me. He's the founder, CEO of Moxy, and I'm very excited to be involved with Moxy. I met Roger recently and have been working on this project to introduce Moxy Monitor to professional sports and college sports. And I think it's a fantastic product that's going to have a great niche in the market in terms of all the different functions that it can provide to trainers and strength coaches around professional sports world. And so I'm excited to be with Roger this morning and just kind of introduce the product and talk about some of the great features that are involved. So Roger, great to be with you.
Thanks, Jeff. We're super excited to have your help in getting this technology out to the NFL and other professional level sport teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be at the NFL Combine coming up next February at the Trainers Vendor Show, and looking forward to that, the PFAS Vendor Show. But let's just kind of get into it a little bit and talk about Moxy and just basically, can you explain what is Moxy?
So Moxy is a small sensor that athletes wear to measure oxygen levels in their muscles while they're working out. So they can measure this in real time while they're performing their sport, and it uses light to take the measurement, so it's completely non-invasive.
And you said it measures oxygen, hemoglobin. Just kind of specifically, how is it going to help a NFL team trainer, NBA, NHL, MLB, college trainers, and all kinds of sports, whether it's individual athlete sports or team sports?
Sure. So we're measuring the hemoglobin and myoglobin oxygen saturation in the tissue of the muscle, and that's where the oxygen is being consumed. So it's kind of measuring this balance of supply and demand for oxygen in the muscle. And this allows the trainers to see inside the body of the athlete while they're exercising. So they can see when the athlete's warmed up, they can see what happens as they fatigue, they can see when they're recovered, and things like that kind of as it's happening in real time. They can even use it to learn what aspects of the athlete's physiology is limiting their performance. So then they can target the training at that specific aspect.
And you've also talked about how it can actually help in injury, not only rehab, but prevention, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So for like injury rehab, if you have an athlete that's coming back from some type of an injury, maybe it's a torn ligament or something like that, we can use the sensor to look at things like left-right balance. So we can see, are the muscles on the left side of the body acting the same as the muscles on the right side? And that can be a good indication that the athlete is fully recovered from the injury. We can also target the training on a specific muscle, so we can verify that the type of training we're doing is working the muscle that we intend it to. And then for injury prevention, you can see what happens when an athlete gets fatigued. So one of the things that the human body does is as it fatigues, it starts to use other muscles to perform the same task. And in some cases, you may not want that to be happening. You may say, okay, the training workout is done once you fatigue to the point that you start to use different muscles to still try to perform the task.
And very important in recovery of athletes, correct?
Yeah, so we can see like for hockey players, when they go on the bench after their shift, we can see how long it takes them to recover before they're ready to go again for the next shift. Same for, if you had a wide receiver running routes, you can see, well, how much time does it take after they sprint down the field and come back, how long until they're ready to do it again? And how many times in a row can they do that before their performance starts to drop off?
Okay, so you talk about wide receivers specifically, and my background is in football, having worked in the NFL for 28 years. And so how, in other ways, would it apply to football players in particular?
So we can see what happens as their performance fails. So like maybe you have a receiver that or a defender that can't keep up in the third or fourth quarter. They start to fatigue, and their performance drops off. So we can see what's causing that. Is it a cardiac limitation? Is it a respiratory limitation? Or is it a muscle oxidative capacity limitation? And we can see when they fatigue, we can see what's happening, and then the trainer can figure out what to do about it. They can target that specific system so that they can keep their performance up through the end of the game, for example.
Yeah, I started my career, Roger, with Bud Grant in the NFL, the Hall of Fame coach for the Vikings. And I remember Bud always said the most important things in success in the NFL, in pro football or college football, is to have a good quarterback and a fourth quarter pass rush. And I think in particular of Moxy and how it can be a tool to help the strength coaches, the trainers measure and actually relay this information to the coaches in terms of rushing the passer is one of the toughest, most physical elements of football and very fatiguing. And that's why you see a lot of rotation among defensive linemen and pass rushers. And it's a very inexact science that's happened in the past where a coach just has a feel for how long a guy can play. Well, isn't in this situation with Moxy, they can really have more of a scientific measurement of how many minutes, how many snaps a guy can really perform at peak efficiency?
Absolutely, yeah. You can set that up as an assessment ahead of time, and you can see doing like repeated sprint type exercises. You can see what happens, how many of those they can do in a row, how much recovery do they need in between, and then what happens when they're not getting sufficient recovery. And I think you could be a lot more preemptive about that. You could plan for that. You could say, well, this guy's had, we know this guy can hold up for 12 snaps, but after that he starts to fall off, and so then you can keep track of that type of thing. And it's both for monitoring that, planning ahead, and then also you see what happens when his performance does start to fall off, and then well, how can we get him from 12 snaps to 14 snaps or something like that. You can make those kinds of adjustments in their training program as well. So much more scientific, much more precise in that you can see what's actually going on in their body.
Right, and translating, of course, to hockey on shifts and basketball, how many minutes a guy's playing, and you think about teams towards the end of the season, are they performing well going into the playoffs and trying to get a playoff spot, or are they starting to wear down? And it would help a coach in terms of practice time and scheduling. I just think there are so many applications for Moxy.
You can see things like when you're getting more chronic fatigue, the muscle oxygen responses will be muted compared to what they normally are. So if you have a guy that can normally desaturate down to 10% and quickly recover up to 85%, when they're starting to see that chronic fatigue, that you might see that they can only get down to 20% or only get down to 25%, and then you say, whoa, we need to back off on this guy because he's getting burnt out. And so you can see that. Rather than having to wait for an injury or wait for a significant decrease in performance, you can be much more proactive about that type of thing.
Well, I'm very excited to be involved in working with you on this project. I think it's got fantastic application, as I said, not only to the NFL, but to all pro sports and college sports, team sports, individual sports. And I think it is state-of-the-art, cutting edge. And I'm, as I said, really looking forward to continuing our work and getting in front of all the different sports teams around the different areas. So thank you for your time this morning, and look forward to continuing our work on the project.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We're excited to get this in the hands of these trainers. It's great stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.